So for my final video, I will be breaking down the Jamaican dialect, kind of doing a review of all of the work I've done so far this semester on my archetype and on this dialect. So something to think about is the some general things about the dialect. So the dialect has wide variation due to a number of factors. One of them is region, which is very common. Another thing is education, and tied in with that is pragmatics. So the way that people talk is tied to how they want to be perceived and how educated they are and how educated they want to be perceived to be. So we have a lot of dialect variations based on that. There are definitely stigmatized aspects of the dialect that people don't want to use if they're in a certain situation. Also, frequently there is code switching with patois, which is the Jamaican Creole. In casual speech, it is very common to hear people speaking some patois or all patois. And that can really affect the way that you hear the dialect, and it can make it impossible to understand some of the dialect in some cases as well. So moving on to the consonants, there are a couple consonant issues that I'll talk about. One is the interdental. The interdental in English is very common. Many of our function words have an interdental. And in some cases, we have some fortition on them, so they go to stops, alveolar stops in this case. You noticed it a lot with the function words. We have a di or dis instead of this. And then in the archetype, I was listening to at one point he talks about doing things with the youths instead of youths. So it's something that varies a lot. It probably varies on the pragmatics of the situation, but that was an interesting one. Also, I noticed several palatalized consonants, not consistently, but in some cases you had some palatalized consonants, such as the t and d, that affect the vowel next to them, and you can definitely hear them. I know in the archetype he talks about bringing people to the table. That T is very high, it's very palatalized, so that's something that I noticed. Frequently also very common in World English is the deletion of consonants within consonant clusters, especially in the syllable final clusters. So we have an example of didn't instead of didn't. We have an example of fac instead of fact. So very common, especially in regular speech in any variety of English, but it seems to be a bit more common in Jamaican English. One thing to get used to when coming from a North American English background, like I do, the T's do not go to a flap when intervocalic. So we're talking about eating, we're talking about meetings. That T remains an unvoiced stop instead of alternating. We also have many variants of R, so with different that are fairly different to the North American English. So they're frequently deleted post-vocalic. So we do talk about the R, not the R. We do have some, when syllable initial, we have some rhotic, we have some that are flapped or are kind of close to flapped. So a lot of variation there, and that also varies with the pragmatics and the region and the education level and all of that as well. With the vowels, which carry so much of the accent, I definitely noticed tensor rounded back vowels. So instead of talking about school, we talk about school. Instead of talking about a cone, we talk about a cone. So the lip tension is a lot stronger in these vowels. Similarly, a lot of lax vowels go to a tense vowel or get close to one. So instead of talking about meetings, we talk about meetings. That second I vowel is tenser and it goes to an E. Similarly, low vowels tend to be raised. So instead of changes, we have changes. And instead of an outline, we have an outline. So instead of those low vowels, we have they're being moved into a mid position, which is a little bit which is very noticeable and is a pattern that is not too hard to latch onto. So finally, I'll talk about prominence and some other related suprasegmental topics that I noticed with my archetype and with some other research I was doing. So one important thing was that pitch movement and vowel length are definitely more prominent in Jamaican English than they are in North American English. So we have a lot of we kind of think of Jamaican maybe as having a sing-song quality to it, and the part of it comes from this increased pitch movement. So the pitch movement moves a little bit more, and the vowel length also shows prominence more than in North American English. Another funny thing I noticed that took some getting used to was that before stressed words, we'd have some glottalized stops, some word boundaries between them, so that there would strengthen the emphasis that the speaker was trying to emphasize. So we do that sometimes in North American English, but it's fairly dramatic when you want to emphasize a certain word. It's kind of unusual, but in this it was pretty common. So he would talk about he wants to make changes, and we can definitely hear that a little more commonly in the dialect. I did notice though a very similar key structure to North American English. So he would begin a topic with fairly high pitch and high prominence, and then as the topic went on, he would kind of get lower and more even, and then when changing topics, he would go back to a higher pitch level and a more varied intonation. So that's all I have for you. Thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and thank you for your excellent instruction this semester. And I hope you enjoyed my attempt at doing this dialect for a very long time.